Hi, this is the Espro Bloom pour-over Cafetiere coffee brewer. Just a quick thanks to Tom MacArthur for pointing me in the direction of this brewer. And Tom, if you haven't bought one yet, I'll send this one to you at the end of this video. Now, I picked this up to give it a go. I was intrigued by it. The fact that it's called a pour-over Cafetiere intrigued me and slightly confused me. But in principle, what was interesting about this brewer is that it can be used with the filters or without to craft a slightly different type of coffee. So I've been putting it to the test. In this video, I'm going to show you how it works, how it brews, some of the things I like about it, and some of the things I don't like about it. So this is it, the Espro Bloom. It is effectively a take on a typical pour-over filter cone with a few interesting adaptations. It's made of metal with a nice heat-proof rubber band around the top. It has a mesh bottom to it, and apparently there are 1,500 holes in the bottom here for the water to flow through. And it's designed with this mesh that allows it to be used either with the paper or without. It's also interesting because rather than being conical all the way, the bottom part of it becomes a cylinder, it becomes straight. And the theory behind it is you get a very even bed of coffee at the bottom, which apparently makes for even extraction through the coffee. There's a little window here, which is a nice little touch. So as you're brewing, if you line the window up with your cup or your carafe, you can actually see the brew through that little window. And I thought that was a really nice touch. It was really useful to get a feel of the pace and flow of the coffee. So let's have a look at brewing with the paper filter. And it very, very much mimics your typical V60 or Carvetii wave brewing. So put the paper in there, and I want to actually wet the paper, give it a good clean, get the whole system set up. And actually this really settles the filter paper in the cone. It seems to be held up by these pleats, and as soon as you wet it, it kind of settles itself nicely into the cone. So I'm going to use 18 grams of coffee in here. A bit different to the recommendations, but I've been playing around with this a little bit and I kind of like the way this has been going. So 18 grams, and then I've got 300 mils of water I'm going to put onto this. And we're going to start with the coffee bloom, which is putting a small amount, probably about 40 grams of water, on the coffee. And then we're going to give the coffee bed, the wet coffee bed, a really good stir to make sure it's all nicely wet. And we're going to wait till about 30 seconds. Now the manufacturers maintain this is a fast style of brewing. That kind of cylinder of coffee at the bottom is going to make for a quicker brew. And they reckon we should be aiming for a 2-minute brew in total. So I'm going to keep adding my water in a circular motion, and I can see through the window at the bottom how rapid the flow is. We're just over a minute into the brew cycle, and I've got a lot of the water in. Last 20 grams of water going in now. And with V60s, I like to stir for the drawdown to be a bit even, so I'll replicate that here. And then we'll just let the coffee draw down. How does it taste? I mean, to be fair, it has caught the character of that coffee. It's natural processed coffee from Peru. It's got some nice fruity flavors in there. It's a little bit boozy as well, and that's come through nicely. I'm getting a nice coating mouthfeel. It's done exactly what it was said it would. It's a 2-minute brew, and it seems to have brewed really well. So let's have a look at brewing without the paper. And the two brews require completely different grinding settings. I found with a paper, with that kind of 2-minute brew time, you need to go finer. And without the paper, you're going to need to go a lot coarser. The holes at the bottom aren't particularly small, so if you don't go quite coarse, you're going to get a lot of coffee debris and grounds going through into the coffee below. But apart from that, the principle is really similar. So we'll put our coffee in, and I've gone for the same dose, my 18 grams. I'm going to put 300 mils of water on top. And because it really is a pour over, as opposed to a so-called cafetiere, I'm going to give it a stir to make sure the grounds are saturated. Now, the one thing that's become really obvious with the brews I've done is you will see that the flow of liquid through the coffee bed can stall after a while. And as those grounds kind of build up down the bottom and some of the finer particles get around the holes, I've had a few circumstances where I've seen a stalling of the flow and the water slowed right the way down. And the only way I've been able to get rid of that is by actually stirring it again with a spoon. So about a minute in, I'm about to put the last of the water in. And just to help it again, just to help the draw down, I'm going to give it a bit of a stir. At the moment, there's a decent flow still, and you can see through the window at the bottom. It's quite useful. My line of sight shows me that water, but it's just starting to slow down. And this is the problem I've been having. Even with very coarse grinds, there are always going to be finer particles, and they seem to stop the flow. And in part, I think, some of those bigger particles are kind of swelling as they get wet, and they're stopping the flow of water. And we've dropped to like a fast drip now, rather than a nice flow through. So I'm going to have to go back in, and you can sense as you stir the bottom, there's a sudden release, as if you've opened a plug and the water gushes through, which is not what you want really. And of all the brews I've done, I've not been able to stop that kind of stalling of the flow. As ever with this, the proof is in the tasting of it. And it's got the character of a cafetiere. You can see some of that residue at the bottom. It's got a different mouthfeel. You can sense that there's the suspended particles, the oils in the cup. But what's really disappointing is the sheer quantity of residue in the bottom of my cup, and even visible in the bottom of the carafe. It really has allowed a lot of coffee particles to go through, which for me, I don't mind cafetieres, I quite enjoy them, but in this instance, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. So what do we think? Well, I'm coming at this from someone who's brewed V60s for the best part of 11, 12 years. I'm also a big fan of the Chemex, and they are arguably two of the most popular pour-overs that there are in the market. So, I've got to be careful here that I'm not comparing this to something that I'm familiar with and that I enjoy using. But in all honesty, with the filter paper, I found the whole process a little bit temperamental. I don't know if it's that sudden transition between a cone to a cylinder, but I was having to very carefully manage grind setting and also the level of liquid in the brewer. If I went a little bit too high with the liquid, I seemed to really accelerate the pace of flow of water or coffee through the bed. And similarly, if I went a little bit too low, I slowed it down. Can't quite explain it, but it's likely to be due to this sudden transition in shapes. That said, it brewed a perfectly nice cup of coffee, and possibly if you came to this without the history that I've got of other pour-over methods, you may really enjoy using this piece of kit. I mean, it looks nice. I love the addition of the hole here, and the real selling point for me would have been the ability to use it without filter papers. But I feel that didn't quite work. Maybe my grind setting wasn't quite right. Maybe I should have gone coarser. But the thing is, I was using a very expensive grinder for this. I was using an EK43 grinder. And, it's £2,000+ grinder. Very few people have got that at home. You may be using something like a Wilfer grinder, where the particle distribution is quite wide. You've got chunky bits with lots of finer bits. And I think if you put that grind in here, then you're going to be disappointed, I think, with the amount of residue that's going to come through these holes or be flushed through these holes into the cup below. That was probably the most disappointing aspect of this brewer. If you've used one of these and have got any thoughts differently to me, then please let me know. I love to hear from you. I learn a lot from your comments. Also, thank you so much for all your subscribes. I never thought I'd cross that wonderful 1,000 mark, but I have, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.